Healthcare workers decided to cremate a zombie, and because of their mistake, an apocalypse begins on Earth. July 3, 1984, Louisville, Kentucky. The owner of the Uneeda Medical Supplies warehouse, Bert, decides to leave work early before Independence Day celebrations. Meanwhile, a worker named Frank briefs the new employee, Freddie. Frank shows Freddie several human skeletons and assigns him to select 2 female skeletons with good teeth for a medical school. The newcomer asks where all these skeletons come from, and Frank explains that they were brought from India, but he himself is puzzled by how they managed to find skeletons with excellent teeth.
How many people you know die with a beautiful, perfect set of choppers in their puss, huh?
Showing Freddie several other gruesome items, like dog carcasses supplied to veterinary schools, before leading him to a room with fresh corpses. He shows the shocked Freddie the only remaining body in the package and mentions that a new batch is expected on Monday. By the end of the workday, Frank and Freddie are wrapping up in the office. Suddenly, Freddie asks Frank if anything strange has ever happened here. Frank inquires if the guy has seen the movie Night of the Living Dead, where corpses come back to life. Upon getting an affirmative answer, Frank claims it's based on real events. Freddie thinks he's being pranked, but Frank insists he's dead serious. He recounts the 1969 incident in a Pittsburgh Air Force Base hospital where an experimental toxic gas leak, called trioxin, made all the corpses come alive in the mortuary. The military cleaned up the contaminated area and secretly shipped the containers with the bodies to a medical company. Freddie wonders how Frank knows all this, and that's when Frank drops the bombshell. The transportation department mixed up the paperwork, and all those bodies ended up at their warehouse basement, where they still remain. Frank suggests showing the bodies to the astonished Freddie, who reluctantly agrees. In the basement, Frank displays sealed containers with phone numbers indicating they were supposed to contact the military about the mistake, which the medical workers never did.
Oh shit!
Freddie expresses concern about a potential leak, but Frank, confident in military engineering, taps a barrel. However, the light tap causes a breach, and both men immediately lose consciousness. Gas begins spreading throughout the warehouse, and the corpse Frank showed Freddie comes to life. Meanwhile, we meet a group of slackers, including Tina, Freddie's girlfriend. They plan to hang out somewhere but need to pick up Freddie from the warehouse first. Finding themselves too early, they decide to have some fun at the nearest abandoned cemetery. After some time, Frank and Freddie regain consciousness and find that the corpse from the container is missing. Initially, Frank brushes it off, thinking the body simply decomposed rapidly due to exposure to air. Struggling with nausea, the colleagues exit the basement, and Frank decides not to tell Bert about what happened. Suddenly, an unusual noise catches their attention, but Frank dismisses it as a stray dog. To their surprise, it is indeed a dog, but not an ordinary one, it's reanimated. Frank attempts to restrain the reanimated dog, but it persists in its movements. Before long, a human corpse starts breaking free as well. Frank secures the room tightly and tries to figure out their next move. He doesn't want to call the police, fearing it would damage their center's reputation, nor the military, as they would have to explain why they hadn't reported the containers earlier. So, he decides to call Bert, and soon the enraged boss arrives and reprimands his subordinates. He realizes that if anyone finds out about this, they'll be taken to court. After some thought, he decides to destroy all evidence and keep quiet about the incident. The corpse keeps trying to break free. Bert says they'll have to kill the zombie at any cost. Remembering Night of the Living Dead, where characters fought zombies by destroying their brains, Bert instructs Freddie to open the door and hands Frank a pickaxe to strike the zombie's head with all his might. However, before Frank can act, the zombie lunges at Bert. Frank and Freddie pull the zombie off their boss, and while they hold it down, Bert grabs the pickaxe and smashes the zombie's head. To everyone's surprise, the reanimated corpse keeps moving. So, Bert grabs a saw and decapitates the zombie, but even that doesn't stop it.
How are we gonna kill it?
Bert insists that the zombie needs to be destroyed completely. Frank suggests dissolving it in acid. However, Bert decides to seek help from Ernie Kaltenbrunner, who works at the mortuary across the street and can assist them in cremating the body. Frank is skeptical, unsure if they can trust Ernie, but Bert realizes they have no choice. To transport the body unnoticed, Bert decides they need to dismember it. Meanwhile, Ernie, enjoying a German march in his headphones, is dealing with another corpse. Before entering, Bert knocks on the door, but Ernie doesn't hear. So, Bert taps his hand, startling the mortician, who grabs a gun and aims it at Bert. Realizing there's no danger, Ernie greets his old friend and offers him a cup of coffee. Bert cautiously asks for a favor to be kept between them. Ernie agrees, and then Frank and Freddie bring in parts of the zombie's body and the reanimated dog carcasses, which are still moving in plastic bags. However, Bert still decides to keep the truth from Ernie, claiming the bags contain rabid ferrets that need to be destroyed. Ernie doesn't understand why they didn't go to an animal clinic, but Bert says it would harm his business. When Bert asks Ernie to cremate them, Ernie says he can't just cremate live animals. He suggests shooting them, but Bert insists it won't help. Perplexed, Ernie demands an explanation, and finally Bert decides to come clean. He opens one of the bags, and a living hand immediately jumps out. Bert manages to free Ernie and he puts the arm back in the bag. Coming to his senses from the shock, Ernie notices that Bert acted very recklessly, dismembering the corpse, but still agrees to let them use his crematorium. Parts of the zombies are burning, and smoke from the crematorium rises above the city. Soon it starts raining, and the smoke along with the water descends onto the cemetery ground. The toxic rainfall intensifies and gradually seeps into the earth, causing all the corpses in the nearby graveyard to rise from the graves. Not yet realizing the consequences of burning the zombies, Bert is relieved that there's no trace of them left and expresses his gratitude to Ernie. Afterwards, Bert tells his team that they must all head back to the warehouse to clean it up. However, Frank and Freddy can't immediately follow his instruction, complaining of nausea, weakness, and headaches. Bert is puzzled by their condition, and Freddy clarifies that both he and Frank breathed in toxic gas when the barrel depressurized, causing them to pass out temporarily. Soon Frank's condition worsens, and Ernie decides to call an ambulance. Meanwhile, Freddy's friends continue to have fun at the cemetery, and Trash dances naked on the graves. Around 10 p.m., Tina finally decides to call Freddy, whose workday should have ended by then. The girl heads to the warehouse, and her friends stay at the cemetery. When the rain starts, the group hastily returns to the car, and Tina forcefully opens the door to the warehouse building. Trash claims that her skin is burning from the rain, and the friends conclude that it's acid rain. The group tries to start the engine, but they have no luck. Tina explores the warehouse area and then goes down to the basement, hoping to find Freddy. There she discovers open barrels containing the dead. Suddenly she hears a noise at the other end of the room, and right in front of her appears a reanimated corpse. Tina's freaking out trying to run away from this terrifying zombie. She can't get up, so she decides to hide in the pantry, but the zombie is dead set on busting through the door. Her friends, still struggling to get the car started, decide to head over to Freddy's warehouse, completely unaware of what awaits them there. Once they get to the warehouse, they hear Tina screaming and rush to help her. But down in the basement, they come face to face with a zombie who lunges at one of their buddies, chowing down on his brains. The group is horrified watching this go down. But then the zombie finally pulls away from their friend's body and announces he needs more brains. So, the friends bolt out of the warehouse, hoping to save themselves. At the mortuary, an ambulance arrives, and the medics examine Frank and Freddy, both looking extremely pale. They inquire about the cause of their poisoning, but Bert, attempting to conceal the truth, suggests they'll need to wait until morning to determine it. Perplexed, the medics proceed to check the guy's blood pressure and discover they have no pulse, and their body temperature is around 22 degrees. As the rain continues to pour, the frightened group opt to return to the graveyard. However, unbeknownst to them, things are about to escalate into an even scarier situation there. Shocked buddies scatter in different directions, but Trash starts lagging behind, and in the end, all the zombies attack her. In the mortuary, the medics explain that by all indicators, Frank and Freddy are no longer alive, although they remain conscious. Then they head to their car for stretchers. One of the medics turns on the headlights and sees a crowd of risen undead in front of them. At that moment, a zombie opens the door and attacks him. His partner notices the commotion and goes to see what happened, but he's also consumed by zombies. Scuzz, Spider, and Tina, having lost two more friends along the way, Chuck and Casey, make it to the mortuary and start pounding on the door frantically. Armed with a pistol, Ernie cautiously opens the door and decides to let them in. They horrify him with the news that over 100 risen from the grave zombies are chasing them. Realizing they need to run, Bert tells Ernie to check if the doctors are still around, hoping to use their car. Ernie steps outside and notices that all the doors of the ambulance are open and there's no one inside. He carefully inspects it, when suddenly, despite Ernie shooting the zombie several times, it lunges at him. Shocked, Ernie retreats back into the mortuary and closes all the windows and doors. Chuck and Casey manage to hide in the warehouse, but they are soon surrounded by the undead. They rush into the office and try to call the police, but a huge zombie bursts in through the window. Ernie, Bert, and the others also try to call the police, but find that the phone isn't working. Zombies are about to break down the front door, so Ernie decides to block the entrance with a heavy cabinet. It doesn't help much, and zombies start breaking into the house through the windows. People start searching for boards to barricade all the windows, and soon they manage to secure themselves from the rampaging zombies. Meanwhile, as one of the zombies feasts on the medic's brains, the dispatcher tries to reach the ambulance crew via radio. The zombie decides to answer and demands more medical personnel. Ernie and Bert remember that the embalming room is the only unprotected place left, so they, along with the group, head there. Scuzz and Spider see how awful Freddy looks and start blaming Bert. Reluctantly, the chief admits that the toxins are to blame, the ones that awaken the dead and which Frank and Freddy breathed in. Tina continues to comfort Freddy, but soon he starts complaining of chills and muscle rigidity. Ernie examines poor Freddy and notices a huge bruise on the side he's been lying on. He explains that blood circulation in Freddy's body has stopped and he's experiencing rigor mortis. Scuzz realizes Freddy is turning into a zombie and wants to throw him out onto the street, but Ernie stops him. Suddenly, they hear a siren. Looking out the window, they see another ambulance arriving at the mortuary. They try to shout to the medics and warn them of the danger, but a horde of zombies attacks the ambulance. Suddenly, Ernie and Bert hear that the zombies managed to knock off the boards on one of the windows. They, along with the group, rush to the window and start fiercely hammering on the zombies' hands with hammers. But soon the zombie grabs Scuzz. The rest rush to his aid and manage to tear the woman zombie, who had clamped onto his head, in half, and finally board up the window with a more sturdy plank. However, what's left of the woman zombie still clings to Scuzz. Bert announces that he's beyond saving, and Ernie decides to capture and tie up the woman zombie. After securely tying her to the table, Ernie asks why they eat people, but she responds that they only need their brains. She explains that brains ease their unbearable pain.
The pain of being dead.
Spider asks Ernie and Bert to step out of the room and asks how they can kill the zombies. They claim it's nearly impossible, and even if they chop them into thousands of pieces, they'll keep on living. The only way is to destroy them with fire, leaving only ashes. However, there are too many zombies, and no one knows how to burn them all. Meanwhile, Trash, whose body lay in the chemically contaminated mud, turns into a living dead and begins to hunt humans. Chuck and Casey continue to hide in the warehouse, hoping to be rescued. Bert, Ernie, and Spider return to Tina and the stiffened Freddy and Frank. Bert suggests isolating the potential zombies. Ernie suggests taking them to the chapel where they can't harm anyone. Tina doesn't want to leave Freddy and decides to stay with him. The others lock them in and leave. Meanwhile, the police investigate the disappearance of 2 ambulance crews and send a squad to the mortuary. Upon arrival, the officers inspect the abandoned vehicles and suddenly a horde of zombies attacks them. Another clever zombie contacts the station via radio and requests reinforcement. Ernie, Bert, and Spider try to figure out what to do next. There are zombies all around the vehicles, and barricading themselves in the attic is equally dangerous. Then Ernie shows them a jar of concentrated acid that will help them fend off the zombies. In the chapel, Freddy and Frank's condition worsens. Freddy complains to Tina about how much pain he's in, and then he says he really needs live Frenzied Freddy starts chasing Tina, and upon her screams, Bert, Ernie, and Spider rush into the chapel and spray acid in Freddy's face. They close the door and return to the embalming room, but soon hear Freddy starting to break free. Bert and Spider try to block the exit with benches but accidentally injure Ernie's leg. They help Ernie into the embalming room and emphasize that they need to get to the cars at any cost. To make their escape, they'll need to move swiftly. However, Ernie points out that he's unable to walk due to his injury. Bert and Spider leave Ernie and Tina inside and, fending off the zombie horde, manage to reach the police car successfully. However, the zombies don't stop and continue to attack the car. Ernie and Tina see that Bert and Spider manage to get away and hope they'll call for more help. However, as they leave the cemetery, Bert and Spider encounter a new group of zombies. They lose control and crash into the warehouse wall, where Chuck and Casey are hiding. They notice Spider and open the door for him and Bert. Meanwhile, Frank, who still has shreds of sanity left, heads to the crematorium oven and burns himself. Blinded by acid, Freddy escapes from the chapel, and Ernie and Tina hide in the attic. Freddy begs Tina to let him in and tries to reach them in the attic. Meanwhile, the police dispatch a special unit of several cars and a helicopter to the mortuary, but the police in the cars are immediately attacked by zombie hordes. Bert realizes they need to call the police and suggests going to the basement where the working phone is located. Spider warns that there's still a zombie down there. However, this doesn't deter Bert, and armed with a bat, he tells Spider to open the door for him. As the decapitated zombie regains consciousness, Bert, Spider, Chuck, and Casey head downstairs. Bert manages to get through to a police officer on the phone, but the officer can barely hear him. Then the call cuts off completely as hundreds of zombies, including Trash, attack the new police squad. Realizing that they can't expect help from the police, Bert notices the phone number on the container from which the gas leaked. He dials the number and gets connected to Colonel Glover, who has been searching for the missing containers for years. Bert has to confess that they received these containers by mistake and didn't report it to the military, leading to the disastrous consequences of their leakage. After gathering all the necessary information, Glover contacts the general and informs him that the containers have finally been found. Bert and the others hope for assistance, but the military decides to clear the cemetery and the surrounding 20 blocks with a nuclear missile, which results in the deaths of thousands of innocent people. Glover contacts the general again, discussing the successful clearance. He assures them not to worry about the massive fire, as the rain that has just started will extinguish it. The general worries that such a situation could happen again, but Glover assures him that it won't. Meanwhile, we see the chemicals seeping underground again with the rainwater, awakening new zombies. Got any strategies for dealing with a swarm of wild zombies? Drop your ideas in the comments below, hit that like button, and subscribe to the channel. Catch you in the next video.